Thinking Jordan Peterson, Waiting for the Cure. Well, it's meant to be a funny title, inspired in part by Samuel Beckett's sadistic play, Waiting for Godot. In this review of some clips of Peterson lectures, plus a discussion and a look at the Peterson Online Academy, we'll be looking for concrete, pragmatic advice for achieving optimal mental fitness. This should be funny or fun. And no, I won't accept his mundane advice to be a man and take responsibility for your suffering. Buck up and face your demons, buddy. Honestly, that is the opposite of what we need. That might be precisely what is destroying good people's sanity. Good people already feel too responsible for their failures and for the suffering in the world. And they are haunted by their demons. See too much of them already. So, what is the solution? What's the cure? Well, before you can know the cure, obviously, you must know the problem. So, let's hear Dr. Peterson discuss the problem, the real problem. One moment.
Okay, so let's go back to the complexity problem. See, I actually think in some sense, it's the fundamental problem.
In some sense. We don't know exactly which sense, but in some sense, it is the fundamental problem.
When you read about the terror management theorist types, they think that death is the fundamental problem. And that's a good argument because it's definitely a fundamental problem.
We're looking for the fundamental problem. Death is only a fundamental problem. Wrap your head around it. Please try.
I think it's a subset of the complexity problem.
Death is just part of the complexity problem, belongs in the larger category of complexity problems. Well, let's give him more time.
And the reason I think that is because sometimes people's lives become so complex that they'd rather be dead. So, and the reason they seek death through suicide is to make the complexity go away, because complexity causes suffering if it's uncontrolled. Things just get beyond your control. And that can happen, if you're hit by 3 or 4 catastrophes at the same time. Maybe you have, the political system collapses, there's hyperinflation, you lose your job, and you have someone that you love or 2 people die, and maybe you get cancer, something like that. Like that, those things happen to people, and they just think, well, there's no getting out of this. Like, it's just too much. And one of the things that's very interesting about being a psychologist is that what you learn if you're going to be a psychologist is that people come to you with mental illnesses, and that's almost never true. People come to you because their lives are so damn complicated, they cannot stay on top of them in any way that doesn't make it look like they're just going to get more complicated. And so then that causes symptoms. It's like there's this old idea, sort of a metaphor for genetic susceptibility. Take a balloon and blow it up until it's beyond its tolerance. It's going to blow out at the weakest point. Well, that's sort of what
How do you like having your mind compared to a balloon? Amazing.
genetic susceptibility is. If I just keep adding complexity on top of you, at some point you'll blow out at your weakest point. Maybe you'll get physiologically ill, maybe you'll start drinking, maybe you'll develop an anxiety disorder, maybe you'll get OCD, maybe you'll get depressed, whatever. There'll be something about you that's the weakest point. And if I just push, that's where you'll blow out. So that's a mental illness, but those things almost never just happen. Sometimes, but not very often. Usually people have just been hammered like 2 or 3 different ways, and then they collapse in the direction of their biological weakness, and then maybe you put them back together, but it's almost always a complexity-related phenomena rather than a mental illness-related phenomena. Not always, but almost always.
Indeed. Complexity. Well, is that possible? I don't think we're getting closer to understanding our problems. Complexity is the primary or fundamental cause of stress and mental illness. Complexity. Has anyone lost their minds trying to assemble a complex piece of IKEA furniture? I have my doubts. Mastering new technologies and navigating bureaucracies can be complex, and frustration is a common symptom of dealing with them. But they generally don't lead to depression and suicide. Maybe complexity is not the right word for the cause of our mental illnesses. When death of a friend results in depression, is death too complex? Or we just don't have the tools for dealing with this. Death is quite a simple phenomenon, really. Um, and it's a simple problem you will not fix through magic or religion. But whether it's complex or not, how do we deal with stress? I believe the professor's advice is to not run away from it, to be a man, yeah, okay, or a woman, and face it. But as I said, that's precisely why people, good people, go insane, obsessing over stressful ideas or memories. But let's not lose hope in Dr. Peterson. Let's listen to him a little longer. Patience is a virtue.
You can imagine the sort of terror that people who experience paranoid schizophrenia are living in perennially, because what happens to them is precisely that. They undergo neurophysiological transformations that makes everything that they once depended on disappear.
What does that mean? Paranoid schizophrenia causes everything you depended on disappear. I don't know. I depend on a refrigerator. I depend on good people. They don't seem to disappear for even paranoid schizophrenics.
Everything comes back as relevant.
Everything comes back as I'm at a loss. Dr. Peterson, am I stupid or what?
Puts early stages of schizophrenia, that's extraordinarily stressful neurophysiologically. So they're overwhelmed with cortisol and their brains deteriorate as a consequence of that. It's just too much. So, and unsurprisingly, right? Because you can hardly deal with anything, let alone with everything.
Using the universal you, all of us in the same basket case.
In what you see. And it's rarely conceptualized this way in the training of clinical therapists, but often what you see when you are dealing with people who are in crisis isn't people who have a mental illness. In fact, in my experience, that's actually quite rare. What's far more common is
They have mental lack of mental mastery, but that's not part of his vocabulary.
the person has become overwhelmed by catastrophe. So their life has fallen apart in some way that makes what they're doing actually impossible. So maybe someone very close to them in their family that they were depending on has developed a very serious illness, and that's thrown their entire financial state into utter chaos. Or maybe they've developed a condition that makes it impossible for them to work. Or you can imagine the potential range of catastrophes. And they're coming to see you because they're anxious and depressed. But the reason they're anxious and depressed is because everything they have ignored has popped its head back up and is hell bent on their destruction.
No, they're depressed because they haven't done the required work to prepare themselves, to strengthen themselves. And these clowns don't teach us how to do that work. Seemingly, I still have hope. We still have hope, don't we? Dr. Peterson.
Often you see people who are being attacked by 5 or 6 of these monsters at the same time. And
We love the language of children's literature. Monsters, monsters. Ooh.
whatever weaknesses you have are going to interfere. It's the fact that what they're facing is no damn joke. And if you were facing it, you'd feel exactly the same way.
There's sweeping generalization. We're all the same, aren't we? Toss us all in the same basket case. No, some people are clearly more able to deal with tragedy, and some are highly capable of dealing with it. I think I might be. Have certainly done my share of mental fitness exercises, which can include highly creative work. That's part of the toolbox. Um, Developing your sense of humor. But no, let me not give away all the answers. We're still waiting for Dr. Peterson. He still has a chance.
Trying practical solutions to these tremendously complex problems.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's a very
Practical solutions. Give them to us.
it's extraordinarily difficult,
Oh,
generally speaking. People
damn.
often don't come to a therapist until they've exhausted their entire range of resources. They cannot figure out what to do. And so, in a situation like that, you can administer antidepressants and maybe that'll.
Did you hear that? Antidepressants, something concrete, something you can swallow or inject. I don't know how its stuff works.
Help person increase their stress resistance, but and it may be that because they're depressed and have been brought down, that they are in fact exaggerating the danger of some of the smaller monsters that are after them. But making the person more stress resilient doesn't give them, for example, a new job, and it certainly doesn't bring back the person they've been living with for 2 years who has degenerating neurological disease or some form of cancer. Like, these things are major. I often see people who, well, they're in a relationship, maybe they're rather isolated, older people.
That was enlightening. Antidepressants don't resurrect the dead and don't produce good employment. He did say that, admit that. How humble of him.
One of the partners is dying and their entire financial situation has become catastrophic. It's like, that's not a mental illness, man. I mean, they may have got into that situation because of one inadequacy or another, but you don't even want to push that too far, because that sort of thing can happen to anyone, and will in fact happen to most people in one form or another, at least at some point in their lives.
We'll all be unemployed one day, or underemployed, or certainly underpaid. Well, most of us are already there, dude. Not one day.
So you want to be damn prepared for that. You want to be prepared for that, because it's bitter and harsh and anxiety provoking and painful.
Well, prepare us, prepare us. We want to be prepared, yes, but will he prepare us?
So hell. Often you can stop things from becoming hell, even though you can't stop them from being bitter and painful and anxiety provoking.
Oh, shit. We can't actually prevent bitterness. That is bad news. We must lower our expectations now.
Please delimit the catastrophe enough so that.
There's the funny word, delimit. Does it mean limit or the opposite of limit? So unlimit the catastrophe. Love that word, delimit.
It doesn't permanently bring you and the people around you down. And that's not so bad, right? That's a hell, or at least it's a lot better than the alternative.
Which is hell. Hmm. Well, I think I've done a good job on that one, but I haven't lost hope. We haven't, have we? There's so much more to share. Let's see what I can find. Hmm, video, excerpt, clip,
The
numbers.
produced view of mental health is that mental health is sort of inside you. You know, it's in your psyche, it's in your mind, but it's not. Your mental health is the harmony of your existence in relationship to the future and other people. That's sense.
Basically saying mental health has nothing to do with what's in your skull. It's about your relationship to the external world. Hmm. Seems like he's replacing one simplification with another, not internal, but external. Of course, we need both. We can do all the preparing and mental fitness exercises we want, but if the external world goes to shit, well, yeah, no one is immune to that. Um, we will deteriorate at different rates, but we will all deteriorate. And not to be, the phrase when the world goes to shit, that shouldn't be visualized as a great drama. No, well, really, we're already there, aren't we? When people have to work too much and worry too much, well, there's no way to stay very mentally fit. People want a little mindless entertainment, a little alcohol, some drugs, because it's just not a healthy lifestyle to be constantly working and worrying and rushing about without time for yourself, except on busy weekends. Well, time for your laundry.
Well-being that can infuse you if you get the balance right isn't a reflection of the proper function of your mind or your brain. It's a phenomena that emerges when everything is in its proper place. And
Yeah, once again, the state of your mind or how organized your mind is, how well structured it is through good lifestyle habits, which must include some serious thinking, all nine modes of thinking, and some other things, plenty of good comedy, etc.
harmoniously, that's what you experience in music. Like music represents that.
Here's another lovely sweeping generalization. Music represents harmony. Has he listened to some of the music out there? I guarantee it's one of the reasons many people are not far away from being clinically insane. It is so unhealthy and mind-numbing, anti-thinking that it is a recipe for trouble. But perhaps the doctor is right. Music, all forms of it, are good for us. And I guess you don't have to worry about your mind. Just listen to some good music. And maybe it will structure your mind for you, create harmony there for you. I hope he's right. But no, I'm not taking this one seriously. Let's give him another chance. Where? Oh, yes. I think, although this video didn't produce anything positive, not in my eyes, My hopes are soaring now because I've just located this video, this clip, which is titled, please, slow down, mister. This is titled, Start Thinking More Positively. Could that be the solution? Oh, my hopes are soaring.
That you're harboring feelings of resentment and bitterness as you're plotting your economic pathway forward. And so you're trying to think about what you should do.
But didn't he say earlier that bitterness is unavoidable? We can only prevent hell, but not bitterness. Well, maybe he's correcting himself. There is hope for us. We can overcome bitterness by thinking more positively.
You have the spirit of resentment and bitterness sitting on your shoulder. The thoughts that enter your mind are going to be a consequence of your possession by that bitterness to the degree that you've allowed it to shape your goal.
Wow. So we can overcome a bad future, prevent a bad future by not being bitter. And we can do that by just thinking positively. I'm trying to imagine how that might work. Bitter because some people betrayed me, a boss fired me, a, a spouse doesn't appreciate me. And just decide that it's okay, I guess. I deserved it. No, that's not very positive. It's all for the best. Yes, it's not to be appreciated. It's for the best. Being fired is for the best. A death in the family, it's for the best. That's positive thinking. I think I got the hang of it. Oh my. Well, have I lost hope yet? Surely not. I mean, not when I found this, I said. Now I've hit the jackpot. Improve your thinking with a practical exercise. I have listened to this a few times, I confess, and well, you tell me where the practical exercise is.
We are to be like marionettes, and that we're just being played, and that we don't have any agency anymore, and therefore we can't be responsible for our own words. Not just our actions. We can't be responsible for our own words and the ramifications. So we have to be controlled, and we have to be stifled by the state, and it makes me very nervous.
So I've been thinking through the importance of free speech, I suppose, from a psychological perspective. And it seems to me that, well, we can walk through some axioms and you can tell me what you think about them if you would. So, I mean, the first thing we might posit is that it's useful to think. It's better to think than not to think. And that,
Yes, I'm glad we're agreed on that. It's better to think than not to think. Maybe not for every waking moment, but all right. We're agreement. We got some agreement here.
might seem self-evident, but thought can be
No.
troublesome and stir up trouble, and your thoughts can be inaccurate. So it's
Your thoughts can be that thoughts cannot be inaccurate. We have to redefine the word thinking and thought. Um, I don't think, I don't believe it's a good idea to have the word thought as a noun for the related to the word thinking. That's deceptive and misleading. Thinking is an action. There's no noun that should be associated with it. If we need a noun, we've got the word the words, idea, concept, image, etc.
Perhaps not that um, unreasonable to start the questioning there, but I think it was Alfred North Whitehead who said that thinking allows our thoughts to die instead of us.
Alfred North Whitehead, brain dead. Thinking allows our thoughts to die instead of us. What utter bullshit do we have here? Well, brings back memories of reading useless books in universities.
So he was thinking about the evolution of thought in some sense from a biological perspective. So imagine a creature that's incapable of thought has to act something out, a representation of the world or an intent. It has to be embodied. And then if that fails, well, it fails in action. And so the consequence of that might be death. It might be very severe. Whereas once you can think, you can represent the world abstractly. You can divorce the abstraction from the world, and then you can produce avatars of yourself, sometimes in image, like in dreams, let's say, or in literature, and fiction, and movies, and so on. Produce avatars of ourselves that are fictional, and then run them as simulations in the abstract world and observe the consequences. And we do that in our stories. We do that when we dream. We do that when we imagine in images and depict a dramatic scenario playing itself out. But then we also do that in words because we encode those images. It's one more level of abstraction. We encode those images into words, and those words become partial dramatic avatars. And then the words can battle with one another. So thought seems to work, let's say verbal thought. You ask yourself a question, you receive an answer in some mysterious manner. There's an internal revelation of sorts. That's the spontaneous thought. You know, when you sit down to write a book, thoughts come to you, perhaps because you pose yourself a question, and no one knows how that works, but we.
Big admission, no one knows how thoughts come to us. Still waiting for him to explain how we can improve our thinking. Still waiting for that practical exercise. We're now over a quarter through this discussion.
Said that thoughts manifest themselves in the theater of our imagination. So that's the revelatory aspect. And then there's the critical aspect, which is, well, now you've thought this and perhaps you've written it down. Can you generate counter positions? Are there universes that you can imagine where this doesn't apply? Are there situations where it doesn't apply? Are there better ways of formulating that thought? But I would say, with regard to critical thought, and to some degree with regard to productive thought, an indeterminate proportion of that is dependent on speech. I don't think it's unreasonable to point out that thought is internalized speech, and that the dialectical process that constitutes critical thinking is internalized speech. So you and I are engaging in a dialectic enterprise. You'll posit something and I'll respond to it, and you'll respond to that. And we're in a kind of combat. There's some cooperation about it as well. And we're attempting to formulate a truth more clearly, at least in principle, if we're being honest. We do that when we're speaking. So our thought, the quality of our thought is actually dependent on our ability to speak our minds.
Absolutely.
And then, so go ahead.
Well, I agree.
Well, just to summarize, Dr. Peterson has two views of thinking. One, using your imagination to visualize scenarios, plan, and imagine problems facing those plans. Really, it's imagination, not thinking. And the second one is internalized speech. And in my experience, most speech does not reflect any thinking at all. So we're stuck still without thinking. We're stuck with imagining and with speaking, internalized speaking. Well, there's still time.
So I think speech is the way in which we collaborate on our thoughts. You know, that's how it works. You refine those thought processes that you've described. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I understand this basic premise that we have these various thoughts that are continually in conflict within ourselves. Unless we're able to articulate them and to engage in others through that process, through that transactional process of speech, then those thoughts are never refined and they remain in this kind of infancy. And this is
yes,
why
well, they're as refined as we can make them as individuals. Sure. But that's also assuming that you even have the words, which you also learned in a dialectical process.
Right, exactly. It's not as though the truth is ever fully graspable, but we can get nearer to it through that collaborative process of speaking and articulating the thoughts. And in fact, even in the act of, like you said, writing or articulating yourself, as with your self-authoring program, for instance, the act of writing things out is what clarifies the points of view for you. I've actually found that the way that I think about these issues now is largely a product of the fact that I've written so much about it and changed my mind through the act of learning how to express myself on these points. And the consequence of not having that opportunity.
So seems like they're recommending discussion and writing as means for improving your thinking. Well, again, the vast majority of discussions don't produce any progress in clarity or thinking. They're really talking about producing an understanding of a situation, of getting closer to a truth. It's not thinking either. As for writing, well, there's most of the world is flooded with writing that is deliberately anti-thinking, void of thinking, does not in any way um, intend to stimulate us to ask more questions, to recognize patterns, understand complex cause and effect relationships, um, develop our sense of irony. No. And most writers are not interested in thinking. And I'm not so sure this well-intentioned professor does much of it himself. I'm not convinced. And my experience, well, doesn't bode well for him.
Is something I barely want to contemplate. And I think that to give an example of the moment, which is that because any kind of attempt to have a discussion or debate about the perceived conflict between trans rights and gender critical feminism, because to even attempt that discussion at the moment will have such grave social consequences, and certainly in terms of career prospects, major consequences, people will not.
He knows all about that. They have to be on point at the universities. They have to be woke, 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 woke.
Have that discussion.
There can't be a more ironic word, of course.
People I know in politics, in the media, they say to me quite honestly, I will not talk about this. I have concerns, I have qualms, I want answers to questions, but I absolutely will not open my mouth about this. And if you don't do that, this is why no one understands the issue. This is why no one has reached any kind of consensus on this issue. All we have is a sense in which to have the quote unquote wrong opinion makes you a pariah. And therefore I better not have that opinion. Well, then that's not a sincerely held conviction.
Are we off topic? He's discussing censorship and opinions, not the art of thinking.
That's just it. If the definition of wrong is continually transforming and in an unpredictable manner, then it's best just to sidestep the issue entirely. And then that leaves it murky and ill-defined and assuming that you believe that thought has any utility. So when you're sitting down to write, or when I'm sitting down to write, and I produce a sentence, it might have come from some theoretical perspective. Maybe I'm approaching something from a Freudian perspective or a Marxist perspective or an Enlightenment perspective, etc. I mean, it's a it's a psychological trope, I suppose, that we all think the thoughts of dead philosophers, right? We think we have our own opinions, but that's really rarely, very, very, very rarely the case. It's not that easy to come up with something truly original, and generally you make incremental progress at best. And so your ability to abstractly represent the world and then to generate avatars that can be defeated without you dying is dependent on your incorporation of a multitude of opinions. And that in itself is a consequence of, I mean, that works to the degree that communication is actually free and that you can get access to as much thought as you can possibly manage. So I can't see how you can deny the centrality of free speech as a fundamental right, or a fundamental right perhaps, unless you simultaneously deny the utility of thought. But maybe if you are also inclined to remove the individual from the central position of the political discourse, then maybe you can also make the case, at least implicitly, that individual thought doesn't matter and that mostly it's just causing trouble.
I think individual thought is key, and actually, even in the outline described there, there's individual agency in reaching a conclusion that has been articulated before, insofar as if you are engaged with a multitude of writers, philosophers, and artists and ideas, and you come out with a perspective, well, that perspective may not be original to you.
Well. Sorry about that. I was just hoping to catch that practical exercise and some evidence that it can improve our thinking. I know the rest of this video. I will spare you the rest. But that doesn't mean we have to lose hope. It's just one other failure of ours. Because, well, actually, perhaps the best, what's the right word? Best place to find the answer would not be in a online YouTube video. Who respects YouTube videos? Let's go to Jordan Peterson's Academy, separate website, where many professors have posted their work. And it boasts that it is the place where we learn how to think, not what to think. I like that. It sounds very good, like it's not going to brainwash us. Yeah, well, I was surprised to discover that in, oops, we're nearly at the end. Well, um, will he ever teach us how to think, not what to think? Um, well, just scroll through some of the lectures posted here. Maps of meaning, maps of meaning. Introduction to Intelligence, Abnormal Psychology, on Narcissism, the Psychology of Wealth, The Boy Crisis, Introduction to Psychology, Social Status. I didn't see anything there about how to think. But perhaps if we have time to explore 650 plus hours of brilliant lectures, hello, then maybe we would find something, but I'm doubtful. But I did check, the YouTube channel for the Peterson Academy. Perhaps I could scroll through that and find the place of any video, any lecture that teaches us how to think. We have one professor speaking about the fundamentals of mathematics, probably teaching us what to do with mathematics. Modern philosophy, they'll tell you what to think. Introduction to Intelligence, he'll tell you what to think about intelligence. Bill Maher, that half-wit. Brain plasticity. Well, he's going to tell us what to think about brain plasticity. Intro to Nietzsche by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, the good Christian. Yeah. He's going to tell us what to think about Nietzsche. Well, you get the point. There's nothing here telling us, instructing us how to think. So, alas, I must conclude I have failed. We have failed. But don't despair. Don't commit suicide on my failures account, our failures account. Let's remind ourselves that there is something called the hexagon system. Let's call it a system. The hexagon. I've shared it a few times, parts of it. It includes the laws of life, a formula for creating a harmonious external world, mostly. Very concise and yet comprehensive. Then the masters of mind, a way to prepare your mind through serious meditation for future tragedies, making you as much as possible immune to them. The modes of mind, 9 modes carefully defined so that you can actually take the time and, what's the word? Actually practice thinking, improve your thinking. Because now, actually, you finally have some clear definitions of what constitutes thinking. And I have 9 modes defined for us. Should be helpful. And there is more. There is more art, of course, there's more, but uh, the hexagon has 6, uh, let's call them tools, 6 documents, and well, I'm not quite ready to share the other 3. The first 3 are really quite sufficient, I suspect. Well, I hope this has been helpful, if not for Jordan Peterson, at least for us. Thanks for listening and thinking. Yes, that's the word. Thanks for listening and thinking.